Welcome to Game Retail Ramblings, episode number 42. I'm your host, Travis Severance, coming to you live from Millennium Game Studios here in Rochester, New York, where it's very brisk and cold, and in this room it's very cold. Had a lot going on, so holidays, of course, are always really busy for us. Managing the two stores is always a challenge, so getting time in front of the camera to be able to sit down and have conversations is hard to do. On top of that, I had mentioned, I think on another episode earlier, we're sort of in the middle of this build out of this other event space that we have that it's hopefully opening up around March 1st. So a bunch of time has sort of been dedicated to what that looks like. On top of that, this may be the last time you actually see this background as well. The new space has a different studio for us to be in. So I'll have sort of a different backdrop. We might have some different perspective and different things that we can do in that space that we're not able to do in this room because this room is pretty tight. So that's sort of coming up. I wanted to talk about sort of and I know it's odd for a February 4th to do a year in review for 2025, but I want to focus, this is going to be more retail heavy focused conversation today. I know a lot of people have been coming in and subscribing to the channel because of a lot of the conversations that I have with my takes on TCGs. Just know that I plan to do another TCG episode about new and upcoming TCGs and sort of what the TCG landscape looks like for this year will be the next episode on here that I do. And I'm going to try to do that before GAMA, which is a couple of weeks out, to sort of set the table for Louisville when I travel there and I do that. And I'm actually going to be at the Riftbound Regional in Las Vegas a couple of days before that as well. We're lucky enough to be one of the premium vendors that are there. So myself and my team will be traveling out there for a couple of days to be able to manage that event. And then I'm getting on a plane and headed right to Louisville from there to do GAMA for that week as well, and bringing a whole bunch of staff with me. So to sort of touch base with some of what 2025 looked like as far as the retail side of things, I think a lot of us, myself included, and a handful of other people sort of looked at 2025. We saw tariffs on the horizon, and I think there was a bit of like gloom and doom as far as what that was going to do for us in terms of being able to sell product. Tariffs typically increase the cost of what the product's going to cost us at retail. It increases the cost exponentially on what publishers are going to spend manufacturing. That's also going to increase the price on the MSRP for customers as well. So with all of that uncertainty, and with the sort of the chaotic nature which they were applied and then they were unapplied and stuff like that, I think there was a whole lot of stress that was sort of going on with the unknown and sort of the unpredictable nature of what was happening in our space. And, you know, sometimes it was paper, sometimes it was plastic, sometimes it was this country and that country. And, you know, at the end of the day, as a retailer, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, I can get myself really caught up what the dangers of the future might be. And like, I end up wasting a lot of time there rather than doing the things that I can actually control and sort of focusing on the business and what I can do for myself, my employees, my customers, my publishers, my distributor partners that are here now. So if I look at how 2025 landed for us, it wasn't a bad year. It was an uneven year, and the distinction of that matters. And when I talk about uneven, like the real 2025 headline was 2025 for us was a strong year financially. And part of the reason why it was a strong year for us financially at both Millennium and Game Center for myself was we had access to TCG product. It's not a surprise. TCGs are on fire. The market is absolutely insane. You've got Magic, you've got Pokemon, you've got One Piece, you've got Riftbound. You know, we're still selling a reasonable amount of SWU. We're still selling Lorcana. And there's a handful of other games in there that we do pretty well with as well. So if we look at that category as a whole, it's a significant chunk of what our business is. Despite allocation being what it was, market pricing was a little bit higher, so we were able to sort of navigate some of those allocation issues. We were able to invest heavier, sort of strengthen and bolster our relationships with the distribution partners that we have. I tend to spread that around. I spread the love around as much as I possibly can. I think there are definitely times in a world where there's allocation where it probably hurts me because each distributor at this point sort of has a product that they're selling that has allocation for. And I think to myself, you know, if I had more money parked with one specific distributor, maybe I would get a higher allocation overall. But then I have this reliance on distribution in one distributor versus having others and so on and so forth. So I probably traded some allocation off for the fact that I try to spread my money around a little bit so that everybody sort of is on even footing when it comes to distribution, in the hopes that the benefit there is if they pick up something that's an exclusive product or something that's a little bit harder to get, or there's some other opportunities with some other stuff, I have a relationship there where I can get the best pricing that I can. The demand for those products obviously remained high. There's more card game players in the world right now than there's ever been, without a doubt. And that number continues to grow as more and more card games come out. So for us, for last year, we still had good breadth of product as far as the different categories. And if you walked into the store as a customer, or you came in as a publisher and you looked around at the shelves, it's not like we had barren shelves everywhere else, but it's just clear that the majority of our cash flow management was put into the TCG side of things and the TCG operation for us. Now I say that where we really in Millennium sort of gas pedaled our online experience as well, because things are running hot. I've been doing this as my 25th year at this point doing this. Sort of interest will ebb and flow all the time. So having my finger on the pulse when it comes to each of these different things, if board games decide to start popping off, like I don't want to have to be able to manage my business in a way where I'm like unprepared for that. Now, on the other side of that, operationally with TCGs, we've created a whole entire department inside of the store that's just processing. It's processing the cards we buy, it's processing the packs that we open, it's getting the stuff put online. Like that area of the store has grown exponentially compared to where it was at the beginning of this time last year, because there was a bigger need for it. We're just seeing more revenue coming in from those channels, and we're trying to sort of elevate what that experience is for our customers and make it so that the time from when we acquire a card to the card getting available for the customers is reduced significantly. So it's not days and days and days after the time that we buy it for it to get out there in our ecosystem to start selling it. I would say overall for 2025, it wasn't a universal success. It was a conditional success, and it was conditioned based on the ability to be able to get product that was hard to find, and having more of it at times than others, and paying a little bit more to get that product was something that we sort of had to manage this year as well. So category performance overall, like I said, it was a split market, right? TCGs continue to crush, they continue to grow. I say that, and we had, we certainly saw stumbles. SWU stumbled for us. The product sales that we had on SWU are not what they were the year before. Our product sales on Lorcana were not what they were the year before. But the growth that we saw in Pokemon, the growth that we saw in Magic, the growth that we saw in Riftbound and One Piece more than made up for anything that we were dealing with the other things that we were stumbling around with. And we had some new stuff to the category that worked out pretty well for us too. Cookie Run still continues to be successful for us. Our play group here is tight but consistent. But we sort of put our faces out there as the front of the singles market for Cookie Run, which isn't available on TCG Player. So our website has really become a landing place for the majority of the customers that are looking to buy Cookie Run singles. So that's helped us out quite a bit. Is that something that I would tell everybody to go out and start to try to do? I don't know how big that marketplace is, right? I'm not sure what the long-term growth is going to be there. I'm not sure how long that game hangs on. I'm not sure what the benefit to that would be for other people. I mean, I'm biased saying that because we have as much as we have out there, but I also say that with knowing how much investment we've had to put into sort of the infrastructure and the operation and the cost to be able to get it to that point. It's doing well. I wouldn't say that it's doing great, right? So we're still having issues, and we're sort of the prime when it comes to the place to go for those types of singles. Miniatures themselves was another thing where it was just flight to quality and primacy, right? So 40K killed for us again, right? I would say it slowed down from the year before, and it's part of what I talked about in previous episodes, and it's that supply isn't as much of a problem anymore. So there's not as much scarcity in the market. We're able to get more of the product, so people aren't hunting for it all over the place. Because there's an abundance of product and there isn't really a resurgence of the game, sales have definitely slowed down a little bit on that game. They tick up with new releases, but in general, it wasn't where it was in 2024, but scarcity isn't as much as it was before. So it's sort of not creating as much of a haves and have nots, but the desirability of product has gone down because there's more of it available out there for people to be able to find. Legion's launch was met incredibly well. I'm not surprised. I think I said as well in an episode earlier last year, when Atomic Mass's focus moved from Legion to Shatterpoint to Crisis Protocol, and Legion sort of was the ass end of what was being focused on during that time because they're a smaller team. There were a lot of players that were sort of left on the sidelines. The new launch, the starter sets were a really good value. The products that they've launched with the new edition have sort of been hit or miss based on what the popularity was of it and how much of the old packaging was out in the marketplace, because some of that still exists, but it still continues to punch above its weight class and does really well. Shatterpoint, not so much. We're still not seeing a lot of draw there. Crisis Protocol has been a little bit more consistent, but it's certainly not bombastic. The other game that I would mention that's still continuing to truck along is Battletech. And then for something a little bit lighter, I guess, HeroScape has done well for us too. It's continued to do really well. I say that I'm only ordering HeroScape direct from Renegade at this point. The unpainted stuff, we tried it here despite the pricing differences. Our marketplace doesn't want unpainted HeroScape. They want it just traditional pre-painted HeroScape. So the majority of that stuff that we're buying is now coming from Renegade outside of like the terrain sets and stuff that we're doing. So overall miniature category, just fine, sort of stable. I think what we're starting to see on some of the ancillary products is 3D printing is definitely starting to have an impact. At-home printing is having an impact on some of the smaller lines. We're seeing Frostgrave sales pick up. Our 3D printing that we're doing in store has been doing a little bit better because we've changed our focus on that. Trench Crusade, a handful of other games that are 3D printing focused, I think are taking some of those sales that would have been in retail before, and they're bringing them back to the consumer in the home base. Whether or not that's expressing out to the game store or it's just being focused around their kitchen or basement tables, it's hard to figure out. I will be at Adepticon again this year, so I just recently booked my tickets for that. A lot of those events are sold out, so it looks like that's pretty healthy as well. So maybe when I get back from that show, I'll sort of do a report on that and invite Ryan in to sort of talk about that as well. Board games in general, we had continued growth in board games, but I know from listening to other retailers out there and from talking to other people in the space, the growth in the board games, I think some of it has to do with focus and attention, and I think some of it has to do with the fact that the TCG money is really good right now if you can get a hold of that stuff, so it's hard to spend a lot of time focusing on the board game side of things. And I think from my perspective, if you're having a successful retail store right now, I think you really have to have at least one focus on one thing that you're definitely good at, and when people walk in, they go, these people really know how to do this. And they also have the rest of the stuff. I think a trap that some smaller stores can sort of fall into sometimes with this idea that you're sort of chasing your tail a lot is like trying to be overly diverse, not having really any exceptional focus on any one category. So you're sort of dipping your toes in a bunch of different stuff. But like in this retail world right now, despite the fact that when the economy is in sort of a weird place, we're a great business to be able to have because we're selling micro entertainment, we're selling escapism. If you're not doing any category well and everything's sort of mediocre, then that's kind of what you're going to get as far as your sales are going to go too. You have to have something that you're bringing to the consumer that they can't find somewhere else, or when they look at a Barnes & Noble shelf. You know, if you have a category in your store and you were to walk into Barnes & Noble or you're going to walk into Target, and it was clear that Target was doing it better than you or Barnes & Noble was doing better than you, that's something that I would look at as a retailer and say, what can I do with my fixtures? How can I merchandise this thing better? What is it that I'm lacking here? Because if mainstream retailers can take a segment of our industry and they can do it in a better way than we can, where our only focus is on that, there's some choices that you have to make as an owner in that situation on how do you do it better. I will say that we're not done with Kickstarter. Kickstarter is still a thing, but I would say that our focus on Kickstarter isn't as much. Now it's sort of a twofold thing. I think publishing has sort of stopped focusing as much on retail involvement when it comes to Kickstarter. I'm seeing much more Kickstarters out there that just don't have a retail tier, or they're not working with retail. And then the other side of it too is like, we've gotten to the point where we've been burned with some Kickstarters at this point, and chasing them around and figuring out when they're going to come and hoping that money gets there and that sort of stuff. Like it's aged. Now I say that knowing that it's a funding arm for a lot of smaller mid-sized publishers, and I'm glad that it exists, and I'm glad it creates games, and there are a handful of them that we'll take advantage of and things like that, but it's become less important to us as a retailer than consistent evergreen games and the releases that those publishers are coming out with that are new releases on our shelves, because we can count on when they're being here. And again, with that cash flow thing, we can navigate that a little bit better because we know when those pre-orders are coming, we know when the product's going to be available, and so on and so forth. So the last one is RPGs. Absolutely remained culturally important in community building. A lot of it comes from the fact that the D&D launch, despite it being, in my perspective, sort of light. I was just looking through what we sold for Players Handbooks last year, and it was pretty significant, and those core books continue to sell. Daggerheart was obviously another big thing for the role-playing world, and that's done really well. The difference, I think, for us for role-playing is we did really well with role-playing in both stores again, but what did the best for us isn't necessarily these long-standing lines that have been around for 15 or 20 years that have a shitload of books and stuff like that. Our indie books with like a zine or two, if I take a look at the total collection of what the stuff is that we're ordering from Studio 2, IPR, and some of the stuff that we're getting through Book Trade, that as a collective category is doing well. Now I say that knowing that each of those books is published by one publisher. So I don't think any one publisher themselves is just absolutely killing it with what they're doing out there, but that category as a whole for us, if I look at that and I were to compare that side by side with some of the longer and tooth lines that we carry, it does very, very well. And I think it's due to sort of the bite-sized nature of being able to grab something for $20 and not feel like you have to buy a full line of books for whatever the game is. Now, there's a handful of things that buck the trend. Vampire and that sort of stuff did well for us. Starfinder definitely did better than I thought it was going to do, and a couple of other things. But aside from that, like, RPGs for us was something we went a little wider on, and we went a little wider on it and looked at it more from a record store perspective than we did like heavy hitters as far as like what, some of the lines can be really huge. Traveler sells pretty well for us, but I don't sell all 45 or 50 books that are in the line. We sell like 4 to 6 at a time, and we cycle some of those out and so on and so forth. So the other thing about 2025 that's important is like, those categories, it wasn't like those categories collapsed. All of those categories showed growth. It just wasn't the growth that TCGs was, and it certainly wasn't the volume. So we had to focus in on, we put our resources towards the things that are making us money. Like if one of those categories were collapsing, I don't know how much money I would put towards trying to prop it back up. It's a thing that retail does at times. They're like, oh, this thing's failing, so like, let me put more effort into it. When it's like, no, you know what? It's probably better off for you right now. If the thing's slipping through your hands, like, lean on the stuff that you're successful with and put your money in there and your investment in there, because long-term, you're just going to get more out of your time. You're going to get more out of your resources and that sort of thing. So sort of play the hot hand. So it wasn't really a collapse, but I think if I looked at my shelves now and I were to compare them where I started to on 2025, we're certainly more narrow in some of those categories in terms of what we're offering to consumers, because the sales numbers just indicated to us, stay focused on the stuff that you're selling 12 to 24 of, and get rid of the stuff that you're selling less than 4 of a year, because it's just not, it's not holding the shelf space like it needs to. The big story for us were events were up. Events were up huge. And to break that down and sort of talk about why it matters, our event attendance increased year over year at an exceptional rate. It was massive. I mean, massive to the point where I don't know how much space I've got in the current store, maybe 6,500 square foot of space. We can fit 250 card players comfortably in that space. And that space is not enough for us to run our weekly events, which is why we're opening the new 10,000 square foot space that's just literally focused on events, because a lot of that has to do with our growth being less focused on competitive play, and more of that growth is sort of coming from casual play, social interactions, events that are events rather than tournaments. We've seen a massive increase from. Now, we're still running more tournaments than we are those type of events, but we wanted to be able to have the space to execute that stuff on a higher level. And younger customers are actively looking for social spaces. They're looking for structured entertainment, and they're also looking for places that aren't necessarily focused on just drinking. Now, I say that with the new space having, we're going to have a bar in there where we're going to serve beer and that sort of stuff, and coffee as well. There's a whole movement in the younger generation is less focused on, bowling alleys and other places that used to be third spaces that are bars and that sort of stuff. Coffee shops sort of get looped into that. I mean, less and less people are going to the movies as well, because streaming services have kind of done that. So as a game store, we can sort of naturally fill that gap if we're positioned in a way to be able to accept those customers coming in and try stuff that's sort of outside of the realm of what we're handed from publishers in general. So we did all kinds of things that are a little bit different. We had a group come in and they ran a mega game. We had We did more Gundam build days last year than we did the previous year. We did more Pokemon trade days than the previous year. We had a couple of trivia nights. We're getting ourselves more involved with spaces that run events outside of the store and bringing them in and saying, hey, would you like to try that in our space? And the results have been really positive. So what I would say is that for us, events have become less about winning and a lot more about belonging. People belong to the space. They want to come in. They want to be part of the community. They want to have things to do, and us providing sort of a larger buffet of what that looks like. Now, everything wasn't completely successful. A lot of times we learn more from the successes than we do from our failures, in that, like, what was it about this event? Was it priced out of range? Did we reach out to enough people to let them know that we were having the thing? Like, what was our problem? Why didn't we do better than what we did for it? And sometimes the answer is it just wasn't a good fit for us. Sometimes the answer was we didn't have enough space. Sometimes the answer was we had enough space, but it was a day when we had 150 people in there that was screaming and hollering, and it wasn't the best event for us to be able to have painting techniques being done at that time. So we're making some of those adjustments and things like that. So, like I said, entering 2025, the tariffs and the pricing pressure was a huge concern for me. I didn't see that at the end of the day. We still continue to grow. I think talking to consumers and things like that, costs have definitely gone up for them, but we didn't necessarily see that at the register. I think if I look at what publishing did, a lot of publishing tried to narrow down, and they thought this sweet spot was like this $40 and under thing. And if I run reports on what my best selling games were and stuff like that, it was still a mixture. It was still, some of the stuff was $120 games and some of the stuff was $20 card games. So it was enough of a mixture there where there wasn't some magic price point that just made everything land easily. So that wasn't an issue. Margins definitely held better than we anticipated, and selective price adjustments work better than blanket increases for sure. Looking ahead to 2026, TCGs are likely to remain dominant. You're going to have continued allocation challenges. New retailers that came in expecting they were going to open a store and they were just going to fill it full of Pokemon, that they were going to just ride this big wave. It's just not a thing, right? And you can get angry about that, but the reality of it is the retailers that have been around longer, that have established relationship with distribution, on-time payments, and a volume of product that they're moving for them are, of course, going to be a bigger focus on them. It just makes sense. It's the same way that, when it comes to allocated product and things like that, we talk to our player base before we talk to the people that are going to walk in from outside and say, hey, how much of this stuff do you want? We can put some aside for you, and that sort of thing. So we service customers differently that are regular customers than we do people just coming off the street that come in here and expect to be able to find unobtainium, hard to get product that's just anybody off the street wants. We want to try to take care of the people that take care of us consistently. So we do that as best we can, and distribution does it as best they can as well. I think core brands are still going to do just fine. We didn't have any real stumbling from D&D. D&D's been consistent. Asmodee's been a consistent board game publisher for us. Like, their evergreen stuff, they went through a whole sort of reimagining, reboxing, new designs on a bunch of their classic stuff, and all of those games sold well, much better than what I thought they were going to do. Like, the reboxing of Catan, I think we only had it for 3 months and it outsold what we had done the previous 9 months with the original. Overinvestment into struggling categories, I think, is a risk. We're going to be really mercenary when it comes to brands that are difficult to sell, that take a lot of workforce to learn with a high level of difficulty to land on an average casual customer. I think there's still a whole ton of people that are coming in to discover our games. I think the more nuanced, the more technical the game is, the harder it is for us to be able to sort of capture that audience without investing a whole ton of work into things. And I think that gets harder and harder and harder as our staff is sort of spread out around doing different things in the store. So we're not going to overinvest in something to try to pick up that weight. Now, that doesn't mean that a year from now we don't circle back, because we will. But at the same time, if you come in and you see that your favorite game is on 40% off on our store, it's not because we don't want to sell the game, it's because the game isn't selling. And we have to sell the stuff that's going to sell in our space because we have a limited amount of shelf space. And like I said, complexity without clarity is going to hurt more than it helps. So with the new customers coming in, the people discovering us, the easier it is for us to get get them into having fun, the better that game is positioned for us in the store. So we're trying to capture that audience, that more social gamer audience than we ever did before. I don't think that 2026 is going to require reinvention, really. I think it'll just require some discipline. I think we have to get honest about the things that are selling and what's selling well and the things that we have expertise for, and gas pedal those things rather than maybe trying to add a new tool to our belt or trying to readjust something that's sort of sliding on its own, like let it go. Don't try to save the miracle, because there's probably something else there that's gonna be able to float you. Some suggestions, some of what we're doing for 2026. We're going to double down on the stuff that worked for us in 2025. Everybody always talks about bubbles and the bubble's going to burst and when's the TCG market going to collapse and so on and so forth. Like, there were a lot of opportunities last year for things to collapse. Like, Magic had some shitty sets. Everybody kind of had some shitty sets, but at the same time, like, overall, there was still a massive amount of growth and there's still more people coming to the game than there's ever been before. So I would assume that that's going to continue to happen. I wasn't like super motivated last year with last year's slate of releases either. Some of the stuff that I was excited about performed poorly. Some of the stuff I wasn't excited about performed well. So it's just clear that I know less about what I'm doing than I think I am. But that said, like, I don't know. I look at some of the Magic stuff that's coming. I'm certainly less enthusiastic for it. I think Turtles is going to be a bit of a struggle. I think Star Trek's going to be a bit of a struggle. I think I'm excited for Strixhaven. We'll see how Marvel does. A Riftbound Set 2 pre-releases this week, so that's going to be exciting. I think there's positive things for that. It's hard to not look at that thing as just a giant amount of money. The other thing that we have done more so since moving into the big space, but something that we're really focused in on more and more now, is like, we used to sort of treat events as like marketing, and now we really started treating events as infrastructure for the store. The events area of the store is not about break even anymore. It's about profit. It's about doing exceptional things, doing different things, doing stuff that's hard to do, finding ways to bring customers a better experience than what we've done before in the past. So we've really made it events as a department. There's an events manager that has that, and then we have staffing that's specifically for events, and there's interactions that are specifically for events. So we're doing some harder stuff in that, and it's paying off. Like, the money is there to be able to do those things. So I'm pretty happy for that. And the other thing that I would say is, despite what you're hearing from me, or what you're seeing online, or what you're hearing people say, or what Reddit's saying, or anything else, I plan my buys around my data, not around panic. And in fact, there are definitely times when I buy into panic a lot. So if things look really, really bad, I'll buy into that and it ends up paying off. So it's something to think about. You know your store better than anybody else does. Take a look at what your data is. Make sure you have a way to measure that data, and make sure that you're investing into the stuff that's actually paying you off, as opposed to chasing after stuff that isn't. So, you know, this entire production sort of exists so that I can have honest conversations with retailers, running game stores. The peripheral advantages, I end up educating some customers on what we're dealing with some behind the curtain stuff, which I think also has an ancillary benefit as well, despite the fact that there's some retailers that will definitely disagree with how I'm doing things. So 2025, I would say, at least for us, and I think the rest of the game stores that are sort of entrenched, wasn't really the warning shot that a lot of us expected. And I think 2026 will reward those people that sort of paid attention to the lessons that they learned in 2025 to make 2026 a healthy year as well. And I think overall, the industry is still in a healthy space, despite all the different people and all the different money that's coming in from all these different sources that weren't there before. You know, at the end of the day, if you've got play space and you've got product, you're in a good spot. And like, our product that we get to sell is better than it's ever been. So there's not much to complain about there. So again, I'm going to end with, next episode will probably be about sort of a preview of new TCGs that are coming out for the next year, or for this year, that I'm excited about, and sort of a talk about what things are like boots on the ground wise when it comes to the games that we're already selling as well, and what I think that 2026 is going to be like for those as well. So again, thanks for everybody stopping by. Great to talk to you. Hang around for the AMA if you like, and happy gaming.